somewhere within the first 5 minutes of this match, I get concussed.
I never do that.
I don't even remember this night.
Saudi Arabia, June 2019. The heat is suffocating, oppressive, almost unbearable. Over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, even after the sun has gone down and darkness has fallen over the desert. Two wrestling legends, both well past 50 years old, are about to fight a match that should never, ever have been booked. The Undertaker is 54 years old. Goldberg is 52. This is being marketed as a dream match, a collision of icons, a battle between legends. But the dream died 20 years ago, back when both men were in their physical prime. Now it's just two aging men with deteriorating bodies trying desperately to recreate magic in a furnace, in hostile conditions, in a country thousands of miles from home. WWE's controversial partnership with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has led directly to this moment. The event, Super ShowDown in Jeddah, is being criticized heavily by fans and wrestling pundits as nothing more than a money grab, a cash-in on nostalgia. The conditions are absolutely hostile to performance. The temperature in the open-air stadium exceeds 100 degrees Fahrenheit, even at night, even hours after sunset. Both men are battling not just each other, but age, ring rust from limited recent activity, and the oppressive, draining heat. And if you love these real, completely out-of-control moments where the fantasy of wrestling collides with brutal reality, hit the hype feature and give this video some hype. Because what happens next proves definitively that even the most controlled, most disciplined wrestler in the history of the business can't stop reality from tearing everything apart. The match at Super ShowDown is an absolute disaster from the opening bell, from the very first moments. Within the first few minutes, Goldberg attempts his signature spear, the move that made him famous in WCW, the move he's performed thousands of times. He misses completely. His head slams directly into the steel ring post at full speed with devastating force. The impact is catastrophic, immediately debilitating. It knocks him unconscious, or at the very least severely dazed. Blood immediately begins pouring from a deep gash on his forehead. He's concussed, badly and obviously, and the match has barely even started. From this point forward, from this moment on, Goldberg is effectively dead weight in the ring. He can't think straight or process information. He can't coordinate his movements or remember the planned sequence. He's completely unresponsive to cues and operating in a confused daze. He's a 280-pound liability stumbling around the ring with absolutely no idea where he is, what he's supposed to be doing, or even what's happening around him. The Undertaker, professional to his core, even in crisis, tries desperately to carry the match, to guide Goldberg through the remaining sequences to get to the finish safely. Then comes the moment that nearly ends both careers permanently, the moment that could have resulted in paralysis or death. Goldberg attempts his finishing move, the jackhammer, the vertical suplex slam that's supposed to be the exclamation point on his matches. This move requires immense upper body strength and precise coordination. You lift your opponent vertically in a suplex position, hold them suspended high in the air to show your power and dominance, then slam them forcefully down to the canvas. But Goldberg's brain isn't working properly anymore. The severe concussion has robbed him of basic coordination and strength. His muscles won't cooperate with the confused signals his damaged brain is desperately trying to send. He lifts the Undertaker's 300-pound frame off the ground with tremendous effort, struggles visibly to hold the position even for a second, loses his grip completely, and collapses backward under the weight. The Undertaker drops straight down through the air like a sack of cement, completely uncontrolled. His head and neck absorb the full, brutal impact of the fall onto the mat. For a split second that feels like an eternity, paralysis is a very real possibility hovering over the ring. A broken neck, a severed spine, permanent disability, wheelchair, the end of everything, the end of the legend. The Undertaker's face, captured in close-up by the ringside cameras, tells the whole story of what's happening internally. The carefully maintained mask of the dead man character cracks completely and instantly, shattering like glass. He looks disgusted, absolutely revolted by what just happened, furious at the situation, by Goldberg's broken condition that made him a danger, by the company that put them both in this position. He delivers a weak, extremely safety-conscious chokeslam to Goldberg, carefully controlling the descent and protecting Goldberg from any further injury, despite his anger. He pins him. The referee counts to 3. The bell rings. The nightmare is finally, mercifully over. But instead of celebrating his victory, instead of performing his signature pose for the thousands in attendance and millions watching at home, instead of doing any of the elaborate theatrical pageantry that usually closes his match matches and sends the crowd home happy. The Undertaker shakes his head in visible, undisguised contempt. His expression is pure disgust and disappointment. He walks out of the ring quickly, abandoning all ceremony and tradition. He just wants to leave. He wants to escape the humiliation of what just happened, the embarrassment of the disaster the world just witnessed. Some sources, including wrestling reporter Brad Shepard, claim there was a heated, angry shouting match between The Undertaker and Goldberg. Accusations flew back and forth like missiles. Whose fault was it? Who put who in danger? Who was responsible for this catastrophe? Who nearly got who killed? Other reports suggest it was quieter, more subdued, less confrontational, but perhaps more disturbing. Two broken men sitting in silence, not looking at each other, realizing they'd pushed their aging bodies too far and nearly paid the ultimate price. What is absolutely confirmed, what The Undertaker himself admits openly in his documentary series The Last Ride, is this. He felt he had embarrassed himself in front of the entire world. He felt he had risked permanent paralysis, risked never walking again for nothing more than a paycheck. He told Vince McMahon directly that he needed to seriously evaluate his future in wrestling. The phrase was diplomatic, carefully chosen to be respectful, but the meaning was crystal clear to everyone. He was seriously thinking about retirement. He was confronting his own mortality and limitations. The illusion of control that had defined his entire 30-year career, that had been the foundation of his legend, had finally completely, irreversibly shattered in the Saudi Arabian desert. But this wasn't even the first time WWE lost control around him, lost the ability to protect him and keep him safe. This is just the most recent example, the most recent failure. The truth is, The Undertaker's entire legendary career is built on a carefully maintained lie, a fiction as elaborate as any storyline. The lie is this: he was always in complete control of every situation. The lie is that the Deadman character was truly unbreakable, invincible, immortal. The lie is that WWE's infrastructure, their technical crew, their safety protocols and procedures could keep him protected from harm. But when you examine closely the specific moments where the script literally burned, where reality violently intruded into the carefully maintained fantasy, where the machines catastrophically failed and the bodies broke down under the strain, you see something completely different from the legend. You see a man who survived not one, not two, but 5 major catastrophic failures. 5 distinct moments where control evaporated completely and instantly, and absolute chaos took over. 5 separate times when The Undertaker genuinely, completely lost it, when Mark Calloway, the human being, emerged from behind the character. Let's start by examining the myth that WWE and The Undertaker himself carefully constructed and maintained over 3 full decades. For 30 years, from 1990 to 2020, Mark Calloway didn't just play the Undertaker character in the ring, he became him. He inhabited him completely. He lived as the character. He avoided giving interviews out of character, refused to appear on talk shows as himself. He stayed in character even backstage, even in the locker room, even around other wrestlers who all knew it was performance art. He was the locker room judge, the final authority on disputes. He was the enforcer of unwritten rules. He was the moral conscience of WWE. When other wrestlers caused trouble, when egos clashed and threatened to disrupt shows, when backstage politics threatened to spiral out of control, The Undertaker sorted it out quietly and firmly. When the company needed someone to be professional, reliable, dependable, and absolutely unshakable under any circumstances, they turned to him without hesitation or question. He was the ultimate worker in an industry entirely built on working the audience, on creating believable illusions, and making people suspend their disbelief. But control only looks real, only appears absolute and unbreakable when nothing goes wrong. Control is a fragile illusion that survives intact only until the first equipment failure, the first miscalculation, the first moment when physics and human error collide with devastating consequences. And when those moments arrived in The Undertaker's career, when reality forced its way through the carefully constructed fantasy like a wrecking ball through a paper wall, the Deadman character disappeared completely and instantly. What remained was Mark Calloway, an ordinary man thrust into extraordinary crisis, reacting with raw human emotions, rage, fear, confusion, or violence. These are the moments WWE couldn't possibly script or plan for. The first major incident happens on February 21st, 2010, St. Louis, Missouri. The Elimination Chamber pay-per-view event, one of WWE's major annual shows. The Undertaker enters the arena arena as the reigning world heavyweight champion, which means he gets the main event slot and the most elaborate, most expensive entrance in the entire company. For decades, going all the way back to his debut at Survivor Series in 1990, his entrance has been an absolute cornerstone of WWE spectacle, as important as any match. In the weeks leading up to the event, during the rehearsals and technical run-throughs in various arenas, The Undertaker expresses explicit, urgent concerns about the setup to multiple people. During rehearsals in the St. Louis arena, he notices immediately that the pyro balls, those massive bursts of propane-fueled flames, are positioned dangerously, unacceptably too close to the exact spot where he'll be standing during the key moment of his entrance. He confronts the lead pyrotechnician directly and firmly. He also confronts WWE executive producer Kevin Dunn, one of the most powerful people in the company's production team, Vince McMahon's right-hand man for all technical matters. He tells them clearly, explicitly, urgently, leaving no room for misunderstanding. These pyro balls are too close to where I'll be standing. I'm getting a lot of dangerous heat coming off them during rehearsal. These need to be backed out a little bit for basic safety. It's a simple, reasonable request based on experience. He's a 20-year veteran with thousands of entrances under his belt. He knows when something is genuinely wrong and dangerous. The response from the technical crew is dismissive, arrogant, condescending. The pyrotechnician tells him that there's just a draft in the building causing the heat he's feeling. The implication is absolutely clear and insulting. You're imagining things. You're overreacting. This arrogant dismissal of legitimate safety concerns sets the stage for near-fatal disaster. The Undertaker, always prioritizing the show above personal safety, always putting the audience and the other performers first, trusts that the crew will make the necessary adjustments despite their dismissive attitude. He proceeds with the event. As his signature music hits and the arena lights dim dramatically, The Undertaker begins his slow, methodical, funereal walk toward the ring. Every step is deliberate and measured. He's wearing his signature wide-brimmed hat and a long black duster coat that flows behind him. Originally, according to his later detailed accounts in interviews, he planned to wear a different piece of gear for this entrance, a sleeveless Hellraiser jacket that showed his arms. But he realized at the very last minute, just before his music hit, that the bulky jacket would completely cover his championship belt, hiding it from the cameras and the audience. So he switched to the duster coat instead to ensure the belt remained visible to the television audience watching at home. This seemingly minor, almost trivial wardrobe decision, made in a split second, likely saves his right arm from third-degree burns or permanent nerve damage that could have ended his career. He pauses at the top of the entrance ramp. This is a signature moment in his carefully choreographed entrance, a moment fans wait for. He stands completely still, slowly raises his arms to shoulder height. The crowd waits in breathless anticipation. And then, at the worst possible moment, at the exact second he's most vulnerable, a massive fireball erupts directly beneath him with tremendous force. The timing is absolutely catastrophic. The flame engulfs him completely in a ball of fire. Video footage from the event, watched by millions of people around the world, captures the sequence in terrifying detail that's difficult to watch. The propane burst detonates while he's standing directly over the nozzle, exactly where he warned them it would be dangerous. He flinches violently to his right, a pure survival instinct overriding his character, trying desperately to escape the column of fire. But as he moves right, attempting to dodge away from danger, a second burst detonates on that side. The dead man character, famous worldwide for his zombie-like imperviousness to pain and suffering, for never showing weakness, shatters instantly and completely. The survival instinct of Mark Calloway, the human being, takes over entirely. He breaks into a full sprint, a speed never seen before during his normally slow, deliberate entrance. He tears off his coat and hat frantically as they burn against his skin. He tosses the flaming garments onto the entrance ramp behind him. His movements are frantic, desperate, panicked. The carefully maintained character that took years to build is completely abandoned in a matter of seconds in favor of pure survival. The audience sitting in the arena is confused and uncertain about what they're witnessing. The commentary team, led by veteran announcer Michael Cole, who's seen everything in his decades with the company, tries desperately to cover the obvious break in character. They claim unconvincingly that The Undertaker is simply eager to get to the ring to defend his championship title against all challengers. They frame his obvious panic and terror as intensity and aggression, but the reality is simple and horrifying. The world heavyweight champion is literally on fire, burning alive on live television. When he finally reaches the elimination chamber, the massive steel structure surrounding the wrestling ring, he enters his assigned pod quickly. This is a transparent plexiglass enclosure where he's supposed to wait patiently for his turn to enter the match. The Undertaker is in severe, intense, overwhelming agony. He sustained first and second-degree burns across his chest, neck, and face. His eyebrows are completely singed off, burned away. He later describes the absolutely horrific sensation in detail to fellow wrestler Chris Jericho during a podcast interview. Despite all that water, despite pouring bottle after bottle over myself, every time I look down at my chest, my skin is bubbling up more and more. The psychological strain during this period is absolutely immense and overwhelming. He's locked in a transparent cage where everyone can see him clearly. Multiple cameras are focused directly on him for close-ups. The world is watching his suffering in high definition. He can see his own skin actively bubbling and blistering, yet he knows with absolute certainty that he still has to wrestle a main event match. He still has to perform at the highest level, involving 5 other men in heavy steel chains. The show must go on no matter what. That's the unwritten rule of professional wrestling. And as he sits there in increasing agony, watching his body deteriorate in real time, his mental focus shifts entirely away from match strategy and psychology. He's no longer thinking about wrestling moves or how to tell the story in the ring. He's thinking about retribution and revenge. He's thinking about violence. His internal monologue, which he later reveals publicly in interviews, is simple and direct. "I am about to kill this pyro guy." The Undertaker, the respected locker room leader known throughout the entire industry for his cool head and ultimate professionalism under pressure, is pushed beyond his breaking point to a state of genuine homicidal rage. He completes the entire match despite the agonizing burns covering his upper body. He performs every spot, every choreographed move, every planned sequence with the other competitors. It's an extraordinary testament to his physical toughness and his absolute commitment to the show and the other performers who are depending on him. But when he finally returns backstage after the match ends, when he walks through the curtain, the atmosphere is absolutely terrifying. Peers like Chris Jericho, who witnessed the aftermath firsthand, describe him as genuinely ready to physically assault the technician responsible for the near-fatal error. Vince McMahon, the chairman and CEO of WWE, recognizes immediately the extreme severity of the situation. He sees the obvious negligence that nearly killed his champion on live television. He sees the dangerous rage burning in his top star's eyes. He acts immediately and decisively without hesitation. The pyrotechnician is fired on the spot without discussion or appeal or second chances. He's escorted from the arena by security personnel before the Undertaker can reach him and potentially cause serious harm. The message to the entire technical crew is absolutely clear. You nearly killed the world heavyweight champion through arrogance and negligence. You ignored his explicit warnings based on 20 years of experience. For a man who built an entire 30-year career on the illusion of supernatural control over fire and lightning, being nearly immolated by his own special effects is a profound violation of trust that can never be fully repaired. It fundamentally and permanently changes his relationship with the production team. From this point forward in his career, he's permanently skeptical and cautious of elaborate pyrotechnic entrances. He never fully trusts them again. The control he projected so convincingly to the world for decades was always dependent on other people doing their jobs correctly and taking his safety seriously. The second major incident is even worse in terms of lasting psychological damage and impact on his career. It happens on April 6, 2014, WrestleMania 30, held at the massive Mercedes-Benz Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana. This is the night that will forever be remembered in wrestling history as the night the streak died, the night the impossible happened. The Undertaker's legendary undefeated record at WrestleMania, standing at an incredible 21 wins and 0 losses over 23 years, is broken by Brock Lesnar in a shocking upset. The loss is a scripted creative decision made deliberately by Vince McMahon to create a shocking moment that would reverberate throughout the industry. But the match itself becomes a scene of genuine, unscripted horror due to the complete physiological collapse of Mark Calloway. Early in the match, within the first few minutes after the opening bell, The Undertaker takes what appears to be a routine single-leg takedown from Brock Lesnar. Whether it's the specific impact of his head hitting the canvas hard, or perhaps a subsequent suplex that follows shortly after, he suffers a severe debilitating concussion. From that exact moment forward, the man performing in the ring is not conscious in any meaningful, functional sense. The dead man character is gone entirely. Only an empty shell moving purely on deeply ingrained instinct remains in the ring. Mark Calloway has stated repeatedly in the years since this match, particularly in detailed emotional interviews during his documentary series called The Last Ride, that he has absolutely no memory whatsoever of the match. He doesn't remember anything from about 3:30 in the afternoon, several hours before the match even started, until the next morning when he woke woke up in a hospital bed. This admission is absolutely staggering when you consider the implications of what it means. It implies that for over 20 minutes of intense physical activity, he wrestled one of the most physically demanding and dangerous athletes in the entire world purely on autopilot, purely on muscle memory. His body executed complex choke slams, took dangerous bumps and falls, and successfully navigated the complicated choreography of the ring solely through 30 years of ingrained muscle memory burned into his nervous system. But his conscious mind was completely absent. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know why he was there. He didn't know what was happening around him. He didn't know he was losing the most important accolade of his entire career, the achievement that defined him. The footage of the match, when watched closely with this knowledge, reveals a sluggish, glassy-eyed Undertaker. His reactions are delayed and slow. His movements are uncertain and uncoordinated. When the final bell rings and the graphic displaying 21-1 appears on the massive screens throughout the stadium, the silence in the Superdome is absolutely deafening. Over 70,000 people sitting in stunned, shocked silence, unable to process what they just witnessed. But the real crisis begins when he walks through the entrance curtain and returns backstage to the private area. Upon reaching the gorilla position, the backstage control center located just behind the entrance curtain, Mark Calloway collapses completely. His legs give out beneath him. The concussion is severe enough that he can't answer even basic, simple questions from the medical staff surrounding him. He doesn't know his own name. He doesn't recognize people he's known and worked with for decades. He doesn't know what year it is. He doesn't know where he is. He's completely disoriented and confused, lost in his own mind. In an absolutely rare breach of WWE protocol, something that almost never happens, Vince McMahon abandons his post in the middle of the biggest show of the year. Typically, McMahon never ever leaves the headset during a WrestleMania broadcast under any circumstances. But seeing his most loyal soldier, the man who carried the company for 3 decades through good times and bad, broken and confused and not knowing his own identity, McMahon makes an instant decision from the heart. He leaves the show in the hands of Triple H and other experienced producers. He accompanies The Undertaker to the ambulance personally. He rides with him to the hospital, holding his hand, staying by his side through the night. It's a powerful testament to the severity of the medical situation and the genuine depth of their personal bond that goes beyond business relationships. Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman, the on-screen antagonists who just won the match and ended the streak, also completely break character. They go to the hospital as well, visibly shaken and deeply concerned by the condition of the legend they've just defeated. This traumatic event marks the first time the invincible aura of The Undertaker is shattered for Mark Calloway himself. Not just for the audience watching, the concussion destroys his confidence completely and permanently. He admits in later interviews that it was a real, genuine struggle for him to get back to feeling like he was in charge and belonged in the ring. The memory loss is so severe and traumatic that Vince McMahon later publicly argues that Calloway couldn't even recall the creative meetings and decisions about ending the streak. McMahon states in interviews that he thinks Mark just didn't remember any of those backstage conversations and planning sessions because the entire experience was so traumatic for him, so damaging psychologically. The incident becomes the direct catalyst for his prolonged, painful 6-year struggle to retire on his own terms with dignity. He spends the next 6 years wrestling sporadically, chasing one final perfect match that will allow him to go out with control and satisfaction, rather than as a broken man being loaded into the back of an ambulance with no memory of the most important night of his career. It's the moment the entire wrestling industry realizes collectively that the dead man is dangerously, frighteningly mortal and human. The third major incident happened 16 years earlier, during what many consider the golden era of wrestling. June 28, 1998, King of the Ring pay-per-view in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Hell in a Cell match between The Undertaker and Mankind, also known by his real name Mick Foley. This match is arguably the single most famous match in the entire history of professional wrestling worldwide. It's entered popular culture beyond wrestling. It's referenced constantly in media. It's often cited specifically for the first major spot, the most famous moment that everyone knows, The Undertaker throwing Foley off the 16-foot-high roof of the steel cage structure through the announcer's table positioned at ringside. While absolutely terrifying to watch, while it looks like attempted murder, this fall is completely planned and choreographed in advance. Both men know it's coming. They've discussed it extensively. They've prepared for it as much as possible given the inherent danger. The second fall, however, is a catastrophic structural failure that neither man intended or expected or prepared for. The plan for the second major stunt is for The Undertaker to chokeslam Foley onto the chain link roof of the cell. The roof is specifically designed to sag or give way slightly under the impact, trapping Foley in the mesh of the chain link fencing. This allows Taker to safely climb down from the roof and continue the match at ring level. The roof is absolutely not designed to break completely and allow someone to fall through through to the ring below. But the structural integrity of the cage proves insufficient for the combined force of the slam and Foley's body weight. The entire panel gives way. Foley plummets 13 feet from the roof straight down to the hard canvas below in an uncontrolled fall. Unlike the first fall into the announcer's table, which broke his fall somewhat with collapsing wood and monitors absorbing some impact energy, the ring surface is relatively hard despite the padding. Even worse, the steel chair that had been resting on the roof falls through the hole immediately after Foley. It strikes him directly in the face with tremendous force. This impact knocks out several of his teeth completely, breaks his jaw, and leaves him barely conscious. From the top of the cage, the Undertaker looks down at the carnage below. For several long seconds that feel like an eternity, the dead man character, who should be looking menacing, triumphant, or completely indifferent to human suffering, is replaced entirely by Mark Calloway, a concerned co-worker looking down at what he genuinely believes is a corpse. In a retrospective analysis years later on the Broken Skull Sessions podcast with Stone Cold Steve Austin, Calloway admits with complete honesty and visible emotion, "I thought I killed him. I genuinely believed I had just killed Mick Foley on live pay-per-view." He describes a moment of genuine paralysis, of complete horror. He steps entirely out of character to peer down into the ring, waiting desperately for any sign of movement, any indication that Foley is still alive. High-resolution photographs and video footage analyzed frame by frame confirm this completely. He stands on the roof, hands on his knees, leaning forward, looking at the medical staff and referees rushing into the ring. He's not posturing for the crowd at all. He's not maintaining his character or thinking about the match. He's assessing a potential tragedy in real time. Camera footage and lip-reading analysis from the live broadcast capture a critical interaction between The Undertaker and referee Tim White. As legendary wrestler Terry Funk and multiple medical personnel swarm the ring to check on Foley's condition, Taker can be clearly seen on the roof communicating urgently with White. He whispers clear instructions to check on him, referring to Foley's condition, wanting immediate confirmation that he's still alive and breathing. The character of The Undertaker, a supernatural force of destruction and death, would never ever show concern for a victim or enemy. But the reality of the catastrophic fall forces Calloway, the person to verify if the match can possibly continue or if they need to call for emergency medical services immediately and stop the show. When he finally sees Foley moving slightly, showing signs of life, the mask slowly goes back on. The character gradually returns. The match continues to its brutal, bloody conclusion. Calloway's reaction on the roof is one of the extremely few times in the entire Attitude Era, known for blurring reality and fiction, where the television audience sees legitimate, genuine fear in his eyes. It establishes the Hell in a Cell match structure as a genuinely dangerous match type with real consequences, but at a severe psychological cost that traumatizes both performers. The control WWE projects to the world is revealed as fragile and dependent on the integrity of cheap plastic components holding a cage together. The fourth major incident takes us back even further, to March 29, 1998, WrestleMania 14, held in Boston, Massachusetts. This event is the crucial pivot point for WWE as a company facing potential bankruptcy. It's the coronation of Stone Cold Steve Austin, the anti-hero rebel who will lead the company into its most profitable era and save it from financial ruin. For the Austin era to properly begin, for the carefully planned story to work, the reigning World Wrestling Federation champion, Shawn Michaels, has to lose the title to Austin. But Shawn Michaels in 1998 is an extremely volatile, unpredictable element. He's suffering from a severe, debilitating back injury that will force him into a 4-year retirement immediately after this match. He's also deep in the throes of serious substance abuse issues that are affecting his judgment. He has a well-earned reputation throughout the industry for being politically difficult, manipulative, and willing to sabotage carefully planned storylines to protect his ego and maintain power. There are genuine, legitimate fears backstage shared by Steve Austin himself and by company management at the highest levels that Michaels might simply refuse to do the job at the last second. He might refuse to lose the title. He might deliberately sabotage the planned finish right in the middle of the ring to preserve his ego and his championship reign, destroying months of careful planning. The Undertaker, fully aware of Michaels' volatility and dangerous reputation, sits in the gorilla position with his fists taped up like a boxer, preparing for a real fight. The narrative suggests that Taker is fully prepared and willing to storm the ring and physically beat Shawn Michaels into submission if he tries to screw Steve Austin out of the title. This story paints The Undertaker as the ultimate enforcer, the sheriff of WWE, who personally ensures business is conducted properly. In later years, specifically in interviews promoting his documentary series, Calloway clarifies this story with crucial nuance that adds complexity. He admits somewhat playfully, "I lied to Shawn Michaels about the WrestleMania 14 threat." However, this admission requires important context and explanation. Calloway explains that years later, when they'd become close friends after Michaels returned to wrestling, he told Shawn that he'd taped his fist specifically for him as a threat, as a way to playfully mess with his friend's head and create a funny story. The lie he's referring to is the specific theatrical detail about taping his fist for combat, but the reality of his menacing presence is absolutely confirmed by multiple independent sources. Verified accounts from people who were there that night, including legendary manager Jim Cornette and others with first-hand knowledge, confirm that Taker was absolutely in guerrilla position. He was watching the monitors intently and seriously. His menacing, intimidating presence was very deliberately intended to ensure business was conducted properly and the agreed-upon finish happened. Taker clarifies his genuine mindset toward Shawn Michaels at that specific time in his career. "If I was to go backstage and see Shawn on fire, I wouldn't piss on him to put that out." That's how much genuine animosity and hatred existed between them at that point. Whether or not his fists were literally taped specifically for potential assault, this moment represents Taker losing his patience completely with the backstage politics and ego games that were threatening the company's future. In a company where Vince McMahon usually holds all the cards and controls everything with an iron fist, at WrestleMania 14, McMahon had genuinely lost control of his world champion. Shawn Michaels had become too big, too difficult, too unpredictable to manage through normal channels. The Undertaker stepped in to fill that dangerous power vacuum. He became the enforcer of the script, the one man in the company who could ensure that reality didn't derail the carefully planned fantasy. The fact that the entire locker room believed without question that he would physically beat up the world champion on live television if necessary speaks volumes about the level of respect and genuine fear that Calloway commanded. This moment highlights perfectly the unique role Calloway played as the godfather of the locker room, necessitating Taker's intervention as the ultimate safeguard. It cemented his legacy not just as an incredible performer, but as the foundational pillar of the company's integrity and order. But it also reveals the darker side of that control and authority, the implicit intimidation that came with his presence, the ever-present threat of violence hanging in the air, the willingness to police other wrestlers through fear rather than respect or negotiation. So what do these 5 catastrophic moments tell us when examined together as a pattern? They tell us clearly and definitively that The Undertaker's legendary control was always a carefully constructed illusion, a meticulously maintained myth that survived only as long as the equipment functioned properly, the bodies held up under punishment, and the egos stayed in check. When the pyro exploded beneath him in 2010, he didn't quit the business or sue the company. He ran through the fire to save the show and protect the other performers, then plotted revenge backstage against the person responsible. When his brain shut down completely at WrestleMania 30, his body somehow finished the match running purely on 30 years of instinct. But the conscious man inside was entirely gone, erased. When the cage broke catastrophically in 1998, he broke character completely to protect his opponent, revealing the concerned human being beneath the monster character. When the champion went rogue and threatened the entire show in 1998, he enforced the peace through intimidation and the credible threat of violence. And when the dream match became an absolute nightmare in the Saudi Arabian desert in 2019, he faced the hard, undeniable truth of his own mortality and physical limitations. These 5 moments are the raw, unpolished, painful reality hidden behind the polished marble of The Undertaker's carefully constructed legacy. They're the specific moments WWE couldn't possibly control or script in advance. They're the moments that reveal the true cost, both physical and psychological, of maintaining the character for 3 decades. Fire burned his skin and destroyed his trust in the people responsible for his safety. Gravity shattered his opponent and revealed his humanity and capacity for fear. Concussion erased his memory and stole his confidence in his own abilities. Age betrayed his body and forced him to confront retirement. And ego required a sheriff, an enforcer willing to use violence to keep order when management failed. Behind all the smoke, the mirrors, the special effects, and the carefully scripted outcomes of professional wrestling, the risks remain dangerously, frighteningly real. The Undertaker is rightfully celebrated for his championships, his unprecedented longevity spanning 4 decades, and his legendary undefeated streak streak at WrestleMania that lasted over 2 decades. But when you dig deeper, when you examine these moments of catastrophic failure, you realize his legend was forged as much in these moments of absolute chaos as it was in his scripted victories and carefully planned storylines. The Undertaker character requires absolute stoicism, complete invulnerability, and total control over every situation. Yet the reality of Mark Calloway's career was defined and shaped by moments where that control was violently, suddenly stripped away from him. These are the moments where the script literally burned, where the carefully planned outcome became genuinely uncertain, where The Undertaker completely lost it. And despite everything, despite the fire and the falls and the concussions and the broken trust and the physical deterioration, he endured. He survived an entire career built on projecting control that reality kept violently ripping away from him. That's the real legacy that deserves recognition and respect. Not the myth of the unbreakable dead man character, but the story of the man who kept going, who kept performing, who kept protecting the business and the other wrestlers, even when everything fell apart around him.